Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Andy Henriquez, who created the Master Storyteller Academy. A very interesting journey, and you will hear this guy is amazing at telling stories and also linking them to the business. So enjoy my conversation with Andy Henriquez. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meaning podcast. And today I have the great pleasure of speaking with the founder of Master Storyteller Academy, Andy Henriquez. Andy, how are you?
Eric, I'm doing fantastic, man. How you doing? And welcome to all the listeners.
Thank you very much. I'm great. We met through FSA. I love what you were doing and the story you're telling. And so there's a lot to cover today. But first thing first, I always like to ask my guests, what is their journey? In your case, what is your story? As I think that you first start by looking at debit on left, credit on right, and you were auditing with PwC, right?
Yeah, Eric, it's so crazy, so today when people are having the opportunity to connect with me, oftentimes, they saw me on stage or maybe they attended a training where I helped them to craft their stories, but I was the furthest thing away from that. I grew up in a Caribbean household and my mom tried to give me the cheat code to success. And in her very strong Haitian accent, Eric, she would say, Enzi, the key to success, you have to go to school, you have to get a good education, and you have to get a good job. And let me tell you something, I followed the script, right? I did everything she told me to do. I went to school at Florida State University. I studied super hard. I even graduated summa cum laude, which is a fancy,
wow.
And I was like a straight A student, right?
Yeah.
I stayed an additional year. I got my master's degree in corporate accounting. While I was in the master's program, I decided that I was going to go ahead and study for the CPA exam. And I took that exam. It was a 2-day exam, wow. 16 hours in total. I passed the exam on the very first go round. But here's the crazy thing, Eric. I'm working with this company. I got every reason to do well. And yet and still, I feel miserable. And
why?
The reason why is because I'm waking up every day to the sound of an alarm clock. I'm jumping out of my bed. I'm showing up to a job with great people, every reason to do well, but yet and still, I got this repeating thought in my mind. And what I'm saying to myself is there's got to be more than this. And I don't know if some of the listeners right now could relate to showing up to a circumstance or showing up to a job or showing up to a place in your life where you felt like you were destined for more. And Eric, for a year and a half, I thought about taking a chance on myself. I thought about becoming an entrepreneur. I thought about becoming a speaker. I thought about becoming a coach. And for a year and a half, here's what I did. I would talk myself into it. And then, Eric, I would talk myself right back out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So, Eric, I don't know if you ever had something you wanted to do, right?
Yep.
And no one else talked you out of it. You talked yourself into it, and then you talked yourself right back out of it. Has that ever happened to you, Eric?
Definitely.
Right. And what it sounded like in my head, it was like, oh, come on, you could be an entrepreneur, you could become a speaker, you could become a coach. And then another part of me would be like, yeah, but you spent a lot of time getting your accounting degree. You studied really hard for that CPA exam. Your mom's so proud of you. And everything shifted for me in December of 2004. Kevin Costner, in one of his movies, he has a line that I love. Here's what he said. He said, when the defining moment comes, either you define the moment or the moment defines you.
Yeah.
That was the defining moment for me because I decided to act on faith instead of acting on fear.
And so you started the company out of the blue, or you started doing like a side gig and still working?
Eric, I wish, dude. I wish I even had a game plan, man. I didn't even have a game plan, Eric. Listen, I had just come to that point, and let me tell you what happened. I was working as an auditor for a company by the name of PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big 4 public accounting firms. And it was late night. I was on a client site. And I was the newer associate there. And there was a manager on site. There was a senior associate on site. And then there was another senior associate. And as an auditor, we would go out to the client site all day long.
Mhm.
And eventually the client ends up ending their business day and they go home. And unfortunately, us as the auditors, we're still there on client side. So
Yep.
the business shuts down at 6 o'clock. They say, okay, guys, we're shutting down. See you guys later. Meanwhile, we as the auditors are still there working oftentimes till 9, 10 o'clock at night. And let me tell you, the conversation changes as we get further into the evening. And I remember as we got later in the evening that I would hear people who were further on than me in the company talking about the things that they wanted to do, the things that they wish that they would have done, the things that they were hoping to do, right? I heard somebody talk about, that they always wanted to open up their own bakery. I heard somebody else talking about how they always wanted to write their own book. I heard somebody else talking about how accounting wasn't even what they really wanted to do. And something about that just stuck with me. And I used that as a lever because when it got to the point where I knew I needed to leave corporate America, there was a part of me that just wanted to stay, continue to get experience, and cling on to the comfort of getting that paycheck. But then there was another part of me that did not want to be the guy that was going to be on a client site later on as a senior manager talking about, I always wanted to become an entrepreneur. I always wanted to become a coach. I always wanted to become a speaker. And I just sort of wish and wonder what would have happened if I would have taken a chance on myself. Like, Eric, I used that as leverage. And I remember when it was time for me to turn in my letter of resignation, when I walked into the office of Tammy Klein, I said something that sounded really good, Eric, but I promise you, I did not know. I didn't know what I was going to do. But what I did know was that I couldn't do that anymore. And I think we can all relate to that, Eric, where we get to a place in our lives where we don't know what's next. Mm-hmm. But one thing we have absolute clarity on is what we currently have going on. We can't do that anymore.
Oh, trust me, I can relate to that.
That was the clarity that I had, Eric, was that
awesome.
I didn't know what was next, but I most certainly knew that I couldn't do that anymore.
So why not, you're a young associate. Why not trying to start something in the meantime, keep on working there? What was the urge to leave and probably break your mother's heart?
Yeah, so Eric, I tell you this, I wish then I would have been able to articulate it, but something instinctively within me knew that I needed to do something radical because of the fact that the way that I'm normally wired, Eric, is I'm a very consistent, thorough, high follow-up kind of guy. And the longer that I would have stayed with the company, great company, by the way, the harder it was going to be for me to leave.
Right.
And I knew that I had to do something radical, right? I mean, there is an old story that gets told quite a bit, and it is where the expression of burn your ships comes from, right? It talks about, this ship is there with, they're going to conquer a new world. Yeah. And as soon as they get there, they decide that they're going to burn the ships, right? Because either we conquer this new world or we die. That was my equivalent of burning my ships. I needed to do something radical, and I needed to make sure that there was no way that I was going to be able to go back and retreat. And so I wish that I could tell you, I thought it through and anything. It was almost like instincts. It was instinctively, I knew I needed to do something radical and I needed to leave. But I tell you this, here's what I do know. Eric, whenever you make a decision to do something that has the ability to be able to transform and change your life, whenever we make a decision that we're going to do something like I did in December of 2004, what I want everyone listening to know is that that decision is going to be tested. Sometimes immediately, sometimes a little bit later, but life is going to test you to figure out, like, how bad do you really want this?
Correct.
I had a test that came up right away, and I had a test that came up after the fact. Eric, here I am. It took me forever to write the letter of resignation. And I finally got it. And I'm like, I'm going to turn this in to Tammy Klein. And then we receive an email. And what we find out is that they are announcing the promotion. When I walk into the office the following day, I got my letter of resignation inside of where I keep my laptop. I'm ready to turn it in. I walk down the hallway, and then there's the sheet with the people who basically are being announced that they're going to be celebrating, by the way, at dinner, that have just been promoted. And there's my name, Andy Henriquez, and I was promoted to, now it's a new associate, promoted to senior associate. And I remember looking at that list and thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe I should stick around, just in case. I can stick around, I can get a little more experience and continue to save more money. And then if anything would ever happen, I always have something I could fall back on, right? And that was what instinctive, the part of me that wants to play it safe. And I remember specifically, there was a quote by Will Smith, and what he said was that there's no reason for a plan B, because plan B is only a distraction from plan A. And the people who have a plan B, all they're doing is setting themselves up for a failure because of the fact that they've actually already pre-planned what failure is going to look like. And so I wish I could tell you at that moment, if you would have went back and asked me in that moment in 2004, I wish I would have been able to say, hey, you know what? I'm burning my ships, Eric. Or I wish I would have said, hey, I don't want to have a plan B. In that particular case, it was instinct, right?
And so what was the long-term test that you were faced with?
Oh, man. So, Eric, I ended up leaving corporate America. And even though, quite honestly, my decision looks pretty radical, but let's put things in context. I'm working a corporate job. I had a full scholarship in college. I don't have any student loan debt. I've been saving money now. I, for the first couple of years too, was still living back at home. My expenses were very low. So, I didn't have that much pressure on me. But here's what happened. I leave corporate America, and now I'm looking for an opportunity. And we have a family friend who knows that I left and I'm looking for an opportunity. He goes, oh my gosh, Andy, we got to set up a meeting. I want to come talk to you. I said, okay, great. He comes over to the house and we sit down at the breakfast table, and he puts all these pieces of paper on the table and he says, I want to show you something. He says, oh man, Costa Rica. He said, Costa Rica is going to be the #1 destination for people who want to retire, that it is stabilized over there. It is growing and there's tons of opportunities. You should really come with me to Costa Rica. I want to show you opportunity. And I think that we could be able to do a real estate project there.
Pura vida.
Say that again, Eric.
Pura vida.
Yes. Pura vida, the pure life, right? And so I catch a flight to Costa Rica. We're there. Everything he said is true. The place is beautiful. I'm meeting people who are retiring there. It definitely looks like there's tons of opportunities. And what we end up doing is we purchase a land. And then what we end up deciding is that on this land, that we're going to get these sort of pre-manufactured homes that we're going to put on the land. The pre-manufactured homes were not very expensive. They're about $7,000. And we're going to be able to sell them for like $21,000. So I'm like, man, this is awesome. So I'm all in. I take about 80% of my savings, and then I invest in this land. I invest in this project, and it's awesome. I fly back to the United States. The guy that I invested in, he's calling me every week. He's giving me updates. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like an international investor. I'm getting these updates, and every week he's calling me. And then about 2 months go by, and 1 week I missed a phone call. And I'm like, well, it's expected. I can't expect this guy to call me every week. 2 weeks go by. I don't hear from him. I'm like, hey, that's a little odd. 3 weeks go by. Now, Eric, this was back in the day where you had to drive to the gas station, get a calling card. It didn't call. So I'm going to the gas station. I'm getting a calling card. I'm calling this guy in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. He's not picking up the phone. I'm calling him day after day. He's not picking up the phone. I'm like, what is going on? After trying to call him for several days, I called him from somebody else's phone direct, making a international call that's going to be very expensive. And maybe the way it came up on his phone, he picks up the phone. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? His name was Mozart, but his nickname was Shushu, right? Because in the Haitian culture, there's always these nicknames. I'm like, Shushu, what's going on? And then this is how he starts the conversation, Eric. Oh, boy there, boy there, boy there, boy there.
Oy.
Now, I'm going to tell you right now, Eric, it is not good if anyone starts a conversation saying, oh, boy there, boy there, boy there. If you don't know anything about the Caribbean culture, it's never good the conversation starts off like that. And here's what I discovered. Someone presented a short-term opportunity to him, and he decided to take our resources and put all of it into the short term, thinking that he was going to get a quick return and put the money right back, and he ended up losing all of it. Eric, when he shared that with me, I wish I could tell you I got angry, I got upset, I yelled, I screamed, I cursed, none of that. It felt like the wind got pulled out of me. I went into the room and I balled up like a low ball and I just cried. Because here I was, I just left corporate America. I was so excited. Here I am getting ready to pursue my goals and dreams. And then I felt like a complete failure because I had taken my safety net and I invested it. And I lost all of it. And there's a part of me that wanted to go back and ask for my job back. But there's also a part of me that was thinking about how embarrassing it would be. And I remember curled up in that corner, one of the things that I tell people, the biggest lesson I learned was this: expect to be tested. Every single time you make a decision that you want to level up your life, you make a decision that you want to do something significant, life is going to test you and see how bad you want it. That was the day, Eric, that my entrepreneur career actually started.
Yeah. We're going to get back to that point, but I first want to reflect on something you said about your mother telling you what to do in life. And if you can share with me, what was your state of mind and how did she took the fact that not only, first of all, you left this career, and then when you lost that money, because I'm sure it's gonna relate to a lot of us listening to you.
Yeah. So, so Eric, I'm going to say that things are a bit abnormal for me in the sense of this. I was so blessed and so fortunate till this day that my mom has always been my number one cheerleader.
Awesome.
And has basically implanted in my mind that I can do anything that I put my mind to. So as much as she was like super proud of me, she tells her friend NZ, my son, he's a CPA, he worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers. As excited she was, when I told her I was going to leave and I was going to become an entrepreneur, maybe perhaps it's because my mom is an entrepreneur herself, that she was like, awesome, you're going to do great. Whatever it is, you're going to do great. And then when
there is, sorry to stop you on that point, but there is awesome. Because a lot of people, when they decide to leave a comfortable job or they want to start something, you have all the naysayer, all the people around
oh my gosh,
giving you all the reason why it's not going to work. Are you sure? You better do this, you better do that, and giving you all the advice, which very often are just frustration for them not having taken the step to leave their comfort zone.
Yeah, it creates so much friction. And Eric, here's the thing I tell my clients all the time when sometimes they're like, oh, my spouse is negative or my mom's negative and they're trying to talk. And I'm like, listen, yes, it may come off as negative, but what I want them to realize is this, because they'll say stuff like, oh, my spouse is a hater or something. I'm like, no, your spouse is not a hater, right? They love you. They married you. What you need to understand is that they love you, and what they're doing is they're projecting their own fears on you. And so for a lot of us that maybe we came from a household where the traditional pattern was what my parents taught me: go to school, get a good education, get a good job. When you say that you're going to leave a job where you got a consistent paycheck, and then you make a decision that you're going to become an entrepreneur, or you're going to do something that is perceived as risky, the people who are closest to you, what they do is they project their fears upon you. And the reason why is because they love you so much, they don't want to see you get hurt. And so because they're not doing it, or maybe perhaps it didn't work out for them, they think that they're protecting you by trying to talk you out of your goals and your dreams.
Very good. It's a very good point.
Right? And if you don't have the fortitude and the wisdom to make sure that even though they are saying these things to you, that you don't have to accept it as truth for yourself. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I realized is there's a lot of people that are going to try to speak into your life that oftentimes when they are speaking into your life, instead of speaking life, they're going to be speaking their limitations. And Eric, I tell you this, here's a little trick that I use. And I want to share this with all the listeners. When I was a teenager, I used to go to California for the summers. I lived in Florida. And I used to go visit a cousin of mine who was in the Hollywood industry. And her husband at the time was really trying to become a better tennis player. And we would go out to the tennis court. I was around 12, 13 years old. He was so much better than me. And every time he'd hit the balls over, eventually all the balls would end up on my side of the court because I just wasn't good enough to hit them back. And I remember one day getting so frustrated that I decided to start leaving the court. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm leaving. Like, you're better than me. It's pointless. He's like, come back. And he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Look at all the balls. They're on my side of the court. I can't even hit these balls back." And he said, "Here's what I want you to do. Just relax for a second." He said, "I want you to pick up these balls one by one, and I want you to, boom, hit it back. That's it. Just pick up one ball at a time and boom, hit it back." Let me tell you something, Eric. Every single one of us will go through life where people are throwing balls on our side of the court. And a lot of the balls that they're throwing are their limiting thoughts, their hurtful words. And one of the things we got to realize is just because somebody speaks something over your life or throws something on your side of the court, you don't have to keep it there. You can make a decision to, boom, hit it back. Eric, every single time someone is talking to me and they say something that I disagree with, and they're projecting a limiting belief on me, I don't even say anything. Internally, I say I'm hitting it back.
Very nice.
And that is my way of not accepting their limitations over my life. Whether that's a friend, whether that's a family member, I hit it back.
Got it. Now, fast forward and back to the moment where you've lost your saving, you're crying. What does your number one supporter say at that time? And what do you tell yourself at that time?
So, Eric, in that particular case, I got to tell you this. I know my mom, and I definitely did not fully disclose everything until years later. I did it for a couple of reasons. It was a family friend. Had I told her the intricacies and the amount of money, it would have, the mama bear instinct would have came out. And that was something that I needed to learn and handle and deal with myself. So even when I was hurting and going through that pain, I hid it from her because of the fact that I didn't want her to also be hurting, because I knew she cared so much about me as her son that if I shared that with her, it was going to really deeply disturb her. Mm-hmm. So by the time I told her that, it was by the time I recovered, right? So the reality of it is I hid it from her, right? And I hid it from a lot of people. And those were some of the most soul-searching, difficult moments, was to be suffering in silence. Because you got to understand the dynamics of this. I left corporate America. I'm going to have friends that were calling me from corporate America, checking to see, "Hey, Andy, how you doing?" The reason why they check on you, Eric, to see how you're doing is because they're hoping that things aren't going well. And the reason why they're hoping things aren't going well, because if things don't go well for you, you help them to justify why they did not take a chance and a risk in their own lives.
Yep. So
I got to tell them, hey, things are going great, even when life has pretty much just punched me in the face. Mike Tyson, I never thought I'd be quoting Mike Tyson.
Why
But
not?
Mike Tyson has a quote, and here's what he said.
Everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face.
That's it, right? Everybody's got a game plan, baby, until they get punched in the mouth, right? So that was my opportunity. I had a game plan. I'm leave corporate America. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to do all these things. But let me tell you right now, I got punched in the face. And one of the hardest things sometimes when you're working on your goals and your dreams is to get punched in the face and have to keep walking around as if you didn't even take a punch. Keep smiling and saying that everything's going great. Meanwhile, your cheek is throbbing. You need pain meds. You're hurting, right? And that's where I was at. I was basically suffering in silence, figuring it out. But like I said, I feel like that's when my entrepreneur career started. Yeah. Because so many of the best lessons that we learn as entrepreneurs comes from our failures. It does not come from our successes. Absolutely. And for those of you that are not entrepreneurs who are listening in, your best character building moments in life also come from the challenges you have in your job, the challenges you have in your career, the challenges you have in your marriage, the challenges that we experience in life. We don't want to have to go through those challenges. We most certainly don't want to, but oftentimes those are the character revealing moments. And those are the moments that when we can push through it and we can grab the lesson, those are the lessons that honestly, we get the highest ROI on. And one of the lessons I pulled from that moment is what I realized was this. This is what I believe is one of the fundamental keys to success, Eric, that I believe that life is rigged for you to succeed. Now, I know that sounds crazy because the majority of people do not succeed, but I believe that life is rigged for you to succeed. But there is something very important that you need to learn in order for you to be able to leverage the fact that the fight is fixed in your favor. So when you enter into the boxing ring of life, one thing is certain, you are going to get punched in the face. When you enter into the boxing ring of life, one thing is certain, you will know what it's like to be on the canvas. When you enter into the boxing ring of life, one thing is certain, there will be moments that you think about throwing in that white flag and stepping out of the ring. But here's what they don't tell you. If you can stay in the ring long enough to learn how to take a punch, if you can stay in the ring long enough to learn how to get off the canvas, if you can stay in the ring long enough to learn how to fight, it's actually rigged for you to win.
You know, that's very interesting what you say now, Andy. David Goggins, in his first book, You Can't Hurt, that's exactly, I mean, the guy is a phenomenal. But that's exactly his message. One step after the other to stay in the game. Yes. And that's to stay in the game, stay in the game. That's really the purpose. Now, take me a little bit through the following journey to that, because obviously you're a great speaker. You can tell stories. But not everybody decides to leave corporate America, and not everybody decides suddenly after losing their savings, oh, I'm going to create a Master Storyteller Academy. I'm going to go on a public speaker pathway. So what triggered that? Do you have any mentor? What happened?
Yeah, so Eric, here's the thing. You know, I was at least smart enough to know that I needed to get some coaching. I needed to learn. So I just started picking up books. Probably one of the first one was like back in college, it was like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then I continued reading these different books like The Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Mindset, Think and Grow Rich. Like I'm just reading these personal development books. And as a result of reading these books, I'm getting introduced to some of the legends in the personal development industry. So I decided to enroll into this 3-day seminar. And I'm there at the seminar and I see this guy at the front of the room. This guy is high energy, he's dynamic. And I'm looking around the room and I'm like, wow, this guy. I mean, the way that this guy delivers, the way that he's able to hold an audience, I was like, man, I would love to be able to communicate like this guy. So as soon as he was done, I ran up to him in the front of the room. I said, excuse me, sir, my name's Andy Henriquez. I would absolutely love to learn how to be able to communicate and speak like you. And he said, okay, young man, go to the back of the room and speak to my program director. And I remember running to the back of the room, and they gave me this 3-page brochure. And I was flipping through the pages, and it was talking about learning how to become a speaker, becoming an entrepreneur. And I was like, this is exactly what I want, until I got to the final page. And when I looked at the investment, I was like, man, it looks like somebody made a typo on here. And the reason why I say that is it said 30,000. That's right, $30,000. I was like, what? $30,000? That's crazy. I never spent that kind of money on personal development. I was like, this is absurd. This is crazy. The young lady who was supposed to follow up with me calls me the next day. Eric, I'm not picking up the phone, right? I know her number. I'm avoiding her. I'm like, I don't have $30,000. There's no way I'm doing this. But the gentleman who was at the front of the room said, hey, what happened to that Andy guy? I love that guy's energy. She says, I don't know. I've been calling him. He's not picking up. He goes, well, give me his number. My phone rings. I've got her phone number down, do not answer. But then there's a number that I don't recognize. When I pick up the phone, I hear, hey, what's going on? Andy, how you doing? I said, hey, how you doing? He says, hey, this is Les Brown, Mamie Boy's baby boy and pride of joy. I'm like, Les Brown? The Les Brown? And for those of you who are wondering, as you're listening to the story, the gentleman at the front of the room was Les Brown, one of the top 5 speakers on the planet. Les Brown has generated over $60 million delivering keynote messages. Les Brown has spoken in front of audiences of over 60,000 people. If you don't know who this guy is, go on YouTube, put Les Brown. This is the mentor to your mentor's mentor of your mentor, right? This guy is a legend. And now this guy's on my phone.
Not only is a legend, but if you can show a little bit more enthusiasm when you speak about him, that would be great.
Exactly, right? Eric, he's had such an impact on my life. And I'm like, this guy's on my phone. And so we end up having the conversation, Eric. And he set me up because I didn't realize what he was doing. But he said, hey, young man, what do you want? I said, I want to become a speaker, sir. I want to become a coach. I want to build a 7-figure business. I want to impact lives. I said, okay, very well. Very good. Very good. He said, well, what kind of coach or what kind of mentorship? What are you doing right now to help you do that? And I realized that at that point, I bought a little ebook here, a little online course there. And these weren't his exact words, but my buddy Trevor Otts, years later, would help me to articulate in so many words what Les Brown was helping me to realize. And what he was trying to convey is that you have to invest at the level in which you expect results. You see, I was totally incongruent. I said I wanted a big life. I was living big dreams, big things I wanted to do. But the reality of it is I had only made small investments. And then we continued in the conversation. I was like, well, let me figure it out. Because I didn't have the $30,000, right? I lost my money and all that. And then I had to catch myself because I realized that all the time when I said I was going to figure something out and then I was going to commit, you know what happened? I was still trying to figure it out and I never committed. So I told him, I said, listen, I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm going to come up with this money. I can give you a deposit, but I'm going to commit and then figure it out. And then I learned some powerful things after that. And one of which is that the more you pay, the more you pay attention. Mm-hmm. That we don't value something until we invest in it. Let me tell you, when I made that first deposit, all of a sudden, I got so much more serious about making this thing happen. And the moment you commit, all of a sudden, doors begin to open, opportunities begin to create themselves for me to be able to scrape up and come up with the money. And the beautiful thing is, that was the time that I enrolled into this 1-year program where I learned how to be able to tell a story. It's first just a story about my mother. I start off with telling that story in that program. Then I put that story in a $20 CD, Eric. And that's all I had was a $20 CD. I remember it took me 8 months to sell 1,000 copies of this $20 CD. Not impressive. Made $20,000 in 8 months. Not impressive at all. But I realized that there was a power in the story. And I said, what would happen if I put the story in a book? Then I end up writing a book. Les Brown wrote the foreword, Show Up for Your Life, right? And then I got better at being able to share and tell the story. Opportunities started to come. People asked me, well, what do you charge to speak? I was like, I don't know. I was like $500, Eric. I don't know. I got better. I was like $1,000. And Then I was like 2,000, 5,000, and 10,000, and 20,000, and 25,000. And over the years, I've had the opportunity, Eric, to speak for companies like Bacardi, Office Depot, Pratt & Whitney, Accenture, Google.
You know
but
that
I can track it all back to that moment.
You know that it's very interesting what you say about practicing. And that I think is, you remind me of Brewster Kahle, our friend Brewster Kahle, who's a Hall of Fame speaker, an amazing person. He was asked, how do I become a professional speaker? And he said, well, you have two ways. The first one, you land a plane on the Hudson. Or the second one, you speak and you speak and you speak and you speak. And you practice and you practice and you practice. So good for you. Really impressive and inspiring. Thank you very much for sharing that, Andy. Now, today you're looking at what's going on in the world. You're looking at what's needed, cooperation, people working remotely or hybrid. Where does the story, the power of telling a story comes when it comes to motivating remote teams and making sure that they're all aligned on the company vision?
Yeah, it's so crazy because, Eric, one of the things that we have to realize right now is like attention is the new currency. That one of the hardest, most difficult things for all of us to do is to get the attention of our customers and clients, get the attention of our team and our staff, get the attention of the people that we're wanting to attract. And to not only get their attention, but then to be able to direct that attention, direct the attention to a vision. If for those people who have a vision for their company, direct that attention to your products and services for the people who have products and services. And if you were to ask me, like, what is one of the best ways to be able to capture people's attention, connect with them emotionally, and then be able to drive that attention towards some form of action taking, I'm going to say it's storytelling all day long. The best leaders are the best storytellers. The shortest distance between yourself and whoever it is that you're looking to influence is a well-crafted, well-told story. We live in a day where most people are engaged in verbal gymnastics. They're saying a lot of words, but the words just aren't sticking and the words just aren't connecting. And we got to find a way to take the thing that we have, the thing that we're passionate about, and we have to find a way to make it so much more compelling, so much more palatable. Eric, growing up as a little kid in a Caribbean household, anytime that I felt ill, and I remember I was probably around 7 years old, I got really sick. And then my mom wanted to help me get better because I had a fever that wouldn't go away. And I remember her and my grandma going to the backyard, and they went and they got this bush, this plant that was in the backyard, and they put it in a pot and they boiled it. And afterwards, they made me this tea and they handed me the tea. And my mom told me to drink it. Eric, the moment I put that cup to my mouth, it was, I can taste it right now this moment. It was the most bitter, most disgusting tea I'd ever had in my entire life. So much so that I was traumatized that anytime I got ill, I wouldn't even tell my mom I didn't feel good just because I was afraid that she was going to give me that tea. Well, fast forward, and now I'm a father. My daughter is 6 years old. When she doesn't feel well, not only does she encourage me to get her medicine, but she runs over to the pantry, gets her step stool, opens the door, and she starts pointing at the one that she wants. And she can't wait to take her medicine.
Nice.
And I'm like, why does this girl love taking her medicine? So one day I gave her this cough medicine, Eric. I was like, I got to taste it. When I taste the cough medicine, it tastes like grape candy. It tastes so good. Here's the thing. We all have medicine that we're trying to give somebody. We got a thought, an idea, a product, a service, something that we know is going to benefit someone else. We could either hand them a bitter, nasty cup of tea and try to force them to drink it, which is what I experienced, or we can find a way to add a great flavor to the medicine so that they don't even realize it, that they're accepting and drinking the medicine because it tastes so good. The flavor that you add to your medicine, it's the stories. Mm-hmm. You can just tell people what you want them to do. You can just tell your staff. You could tell your community. You could tell your customers. You could tell your clients what you want, or you can become great at taking that medicine and putting it inside something that just tastes so good. And as a result, you no longer have to be trying to convince people to take medicine, but you'll have them literally begging you for the medicine. That is the power of storytelling, and why stories are going to matter more today than they ever have, because we've got to do a great job of being able to get people's attention and getting them to take the medicine, which is our products, our services. It's our message. It is the thing that we have to deliver. And since it's so hard to get people to take their medicine, we got to find a way to make it really flavorful, man.
Awesome. Awesome. Andy, thank you so much for sharing that with me today. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so absolutely. For those of you that are on social media, I am at Andy Henriquez across social media. On Instagram, for those of you on Instagram, I'm at Show Up For Your Life. And also, if they want to get in contact with me, they can go ahead and head over to andyhenriquez.com or masterstorytelleracademy.com.
Thank you so much, my friend. I hope to see you soon.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Andy, thank you so much for sharing those stories with me today and obviously linking them to the business. You're a master at that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.